Hi everyone, welcome to Lecture 15. In this lecture, we're going to focus on Down syndrome. And just as a reminder, your readings and references for this lecture is at the National Down Syndrome Society's website. So there's nothing particular you need to look at, but just get a good sense, look around. The information that I would want you to know on a quiz, I'll present in this lecture, but really make sure you take a good look around and reference that if you want to use this source in your discussion posts. So before we get started, I'm just going to show you guys this video that kind of just talks about some things that people with Down syndrome don't really like to hear from people with Down syndrome.
Because you never know what might come out of the house.
Like, what is Down syndrome, Bella's saying?
What makes you angry?
Smoking. Nigel Farage.
You don't like him?
Not in the slightest.
People with Down syndrome can't have relationships.
Well, obviously they can have relationships.
Kissing is my favourite pastime,
Yeah.
I reckon.
So you're really romantic.
Oh, I'm so romantic.
Yeah.
I like William Hague and yours. Oh, and Justin Bieber. Not David Cameron though. And blah.
People with Down syndrome can't learn. Yeah. Alright then.
Yeah.
Yes, they can.
Maybe sometimes they might need a little bit of a push.
Yep.
I've got qualifications in customer service. Qualification in hairdressing.
I passed all 10 of my GCSEs.
People with Down syndrome are just normal people.
You know, will she be able to do this? Will she be able to do that? And I say, yeah, she'll be able to do everything. It's just we'll take the scenic route. This is our pet hate. Adults with Down syndrome are like children.
Oh.
Do you ever have people like come up to you and talk to you like you're a child?
Yes, it's patronising.
Yeah.
But some people do the head tilt as well. Oh, bless her. Isn't she lovely? How old is she?
Infantilisation, do one.
Yeah, please.
Some people say it's a disease. It's not.
No.
Down syndrome is a condition which is caused by an extra chromosome.
Doesn't stop you from doing anything, does it?
Well, exactly.
We bring something different to the world that other people can't.
People sometimes do come up with words like Down syndrome sufferer. The only thing I suffer from is bad attitudes.
Those with Down syndrome can't live independently.
I hope not. Of course they can, because I live independently.
Hopefully wanting to live with my boyfriend.
I wouldn't mind living somewhere with my girlfriend as well.
And have a life and go out with friends and having a nightlife as well.
I get my ensuite back if you move out.
So you want me to move out today?
No. Those with Down syndrome can't have jobs.
Well, that's wrong.
Of course they can. Yeah, of course they can.
Yeah.
I've had so many different jobs.
I work in a house and I love it.
Yeah.
Went through retail, office work, went back to retail, and then went back to office work, and then media.
I'm also an actor as well.
I got a job as an actor and a dancer.
You're famous one day, Tommy.
Yeah. Well, even more.
One day might be put in EastEnders.
But she can be anything she wants to be. Well, unless she wants to play for Liverpool, in which case...
It's quite upsetting to hear about something like that.
It was 90% of people were getting rid of it because they found out they were Down syndrome, and I thought, that's shocking.
Some people call this Down syndrome serious handicaps, but it's not.
Babies with Down syndrome can be aborted at 40 weeks,
I've heard of that.
whereas a baby without Down syndrome, obviously the cut-off point is 24 weeks, so I think there's an ethical question there.
Because we can all lead amazingly active lives, can't we?
Yeah.
She doesn't like the testing.
you wish you didn't have Down syndrome?
No. Why? It's just me, it's part of me.
I may have Down syndrome, but without it, I don't think I'd really be me.
I don't wish that. I wish that people will see Down syndrome in a positive light.
My motto in life is Down syndrome, so what?
All right, so that just, is, I feel like, gives you guys a good perspective from individuals that actually have Down syndrome themselves. Of note too, when folks see this video, sometimes they're taken aback by the abortion rate and the rules and regulations about aborting pregnancies if the fetus has Down syndrome at 40 weeks. That is not the case in the US, but it is the case in the UK. So that's why the rates are much higher. In some states, it's actually, in the US, it's actually flipped. So actually, if you find out that you do have a child with Down syndrome, you can't abort. So some of those things are, it's much different over here. So just want to let you guys know that, because that's usually a common question I get after we watch that video. So moving forward into what Down syndrome is and what are the causes. So we know it occurs when an individual has a full or partial copy of chromosome 21. And this additional genetic material alters the course of development and causes the characteristics commonly associated with Down syndrome. And the first type is trisomy 21, which happens, this accounts for 95% or most of the cases. And this happens due to non-disjunction. And in non-disjunction, what happens is it results in an embryo with 3 copies of chromosome 21 instead of the usual 2. And then prior to or at conception, a pair of 21st chromosomes in either the sperm or the egg fails to separate. And as the embryo develops, the extra chromosome is replicated in every cell of the body. This type, again, of Down syndrome, which accounts for 95% of cases, is called trisomy 21. And then when we're looking at mosaicism, this accounts for about 1% of all cases of Down syndrome. And research has indicated that individuals with mosaic Down syndrome may have fewer characteristics of Down syndrome than those with other types. However, again, broad generalizations are possible due to the wide range of abilities people with Down syndrome do possess. And then the last cause has to do with translocation, again, on part of chromosome 21. And when we're looking at here in the translocation, part of chromosome 21 breaks off during cell division and then attaches to another chromosome. Typically, it's chromosome 14. And while the total number of chromosomes in the cell remains at 46, the presence of an extra pair of chromosome 21 causes the characteristics of Down syndrome. And when we're looking here at specific, the causes, we do know that when we're looking at the non-disjunction specifically here, we do know that the cause of non-disjunction, when it does happen, is currently unknown, but research has shown that it does increase in frequency as a woman ages, and we'll talk about that. However, that due to the birth rates being higher in younger women, 80% of children with Down syndrome are actually born to women under age 35, so women that aren't of advanced maternal age. And there's no definitive scientific research that indicates that Down syndrome is caused by any environmental factors or the parents' activities before or during pregnancy. The prevalence is 1 in close to 700. This makes it the most common genetic condition, but not the most prevalent inherited cause of intellectual disability. So again, it's the most common genetic condition that causes intellectual disability, but not the most prevalent inherited. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about the most prevalent inherited cause of intellectual disability a little bit later in Module 3. So it's not inherited. It's really important to point that out, but it is the most common genetic condition. So when we're looking at causes again, we know that Down syndrome occurs in people of all races and economic levels, again, but we know that older women have an increased chance of having a child with Down syndrome. A 35-year-old woman has about a 1 in 350 chance of conceiving a child with Down syndrome. And this chance increases gradually to 1 in 100 by age 40. At age 45, the incident becomes approximately 1 in 30. However, the age of the mother does not seem to be linked to the risk of translocation. And so you can kind of see here how much, again, advanced maternal age, we do know in general, is a biomedical risk factor for individuals with having a child with a developmental disability, but specifically with Down syndrome, you can see how much the rates increase dramatically once a woman reaches age 35. We know that all 3 types of Down syndrome, again, are genetic conditions, so they're related to genes, but only 1% of all cases of Down syndrome have a hereditary component, so it's passed down from the parent to the child through genes. Heredity is not a factor in trisomy 21, the non-disjunction, and the mosaicism cases. However, in about a third of cases of Down syndrome resulting from the translocation, there is a hereditary component. But this only accounts for 1%, about 1% of all cases of Down syndrome. Again, though, the age of the mother doesn't seem to be linked to the risk of translocation. Most cases are sporadic, just chance events. However, in about 1/3 of cases, one parent is a carrier of a translocated chromosome. So how do we diagnose this definitively? There are different screening tests. Blood tests are usually performed in conjunction with some type of detailed sonogram to check for physical markers, so some characteristics that researchers feel may have significant association with Down syndrome. Again, this is used to estimate chance, and it's not invasive. Our diagnostic procedures here are usually recommended in women of advanced maternal age, so 35 or older. And they do carry up to 1% risk of causing miscarriage, but they're almost 100% accurate in diagnosing. At birth, some diagnostic kind of things that can, specifically looking at physical features can be done for diagnosis, low muscle tone, a single deep crease across the palm of the hand, a highly flattened facial profile, but again, that varies, an upward slant to eyes, but karyotyping is done to confirm diagnosis. And so this is just an example of a Down syndrome karyotype for an individual that has trisomy 21, and you can see the extra chromosome there. All right, when we're looking at early development for individuals with Down syndrome, there's this separate milestone range for children with Down syndrome that's been put out. And I want you guys just to think about why this might be important to have a separate kind of developmental milestone marker. Here you have all the developmental milestones that we expect most individuals to be able to do. This is the typical range, so for individuals without Down syndrome, and this is the range for children with Down syndrome, so you can compare them. But it's important to note that while individuals with Down syndrome will achieve the same milestones as other children, they just do so at their own timetable, and this really allows for families to see that. In the monitoring of the development of a child with Down syndrome, it's more useful to look at the sequence of milestones achieved rather than at the age in which they actually achieve it. But just if you can think about this and the utility maybe for a family to have this information. So just some concerns, so additional concerns for individuals with Down syndrome. We do know that life expectancy for people with Down syndrome has increased dramatically in recent decades. In the mid-'80s, life expectancy was about 25, and it's about 60 today. We also know, again, people with Down syndrome, again, are able to attend school, work, and participate in decisions and contribute to society in so many meaningful ways, which I'll show you guys at the end. But these are just some common medical conditions. The biggest, one being, again, that really making sure you that most folks always have to keep an eye out for is the heart defects, respiratory and hearing problems, higher risk of Alzheimer's, childhood leukemia, and various thyroid conditions. We know cognitive delays can be from mild to moderate, but intellectual disability is a diagnostic feature of Down syndrome. Some behavioral difficulties that are seen, this wandering off, kind of following their feet, being a little more stubborn at times, difficulties paying attention, so obsessive compulsive disorders, and the rate of autism spectrum disorder is seen in approximately 5 to 7% of children with Down syndrome. It should be noted that the diagnosis is usually made at a later age, so about 6 to 8, than in the general population. And regression of language skills, if present, also occurs later, so about 3 to 4 age. The intervention strategies are the same for any child with autism, and it's important for the child to be identified as early as possible, again, so they can receive the most appropriate therapeutic and educational services. So when we're looking at, as we go into adolescence and adulthood, other things, just to make sure, health concerns, so hypothyroidism, celiac disease, which is an autoimmune reaction to gluten, which is a protein component of wheat products. This one here, the allotanoxial instability, this results from a laxity in the ligaments that hold together the first and the second cervical vertebrae in the neck. If the ligaments become loose, a bony process of the axis may impinge on the spinal cord and can cause severe nerve damage. And this is why it's really important that during any bending or moving neck, so any kind of physical exercise that leaves the neck more vulnerable, for individuals that have this, it's really important that just adaptive supports are taken into consideration so they're safe. So again, it's really, really important. It's diagnosed by x-rays of the neck, and this condition occurs in approximately 15% of individuals with Down syndrome, and the only definitive treatment is surgical. We also know that individuals with Down syndrome are at a higher rate for obesity, obstructive sleep apnea, or stopping breathing while sleeping, and Alzheimer's. They are at a lower health risk for coronary atherosclerosis, substance abuse, violence, and pain. So they have a higher threshold for pain. So we're thinking again also as we move into adolescence and adulthood with this population, it's really important to foster independence. And so I always like this quote that if you can't teach your child to cross the street, she'll never know what's on the other side. So it's really important for parents to try to foster independence with this population as early as possible. Also to get really involved with self-advocacy. The National Down Syndrome Society and other, local organizations or local chapters, I think really do a nice job at promoting self-advocacy also through, Special Olympics. When we're looking at employment and volunteer work, there are different types of employment here. So competitive employment, this can be used. That's just like employment like anyone else, where you can fade supports, have a job coach, some natural supports in the environment and following up. Supportive employment, this can be long-term or ongoing. Sheltered employment or sheltered workshops. These are often criticized for being more segregated settings because some workshops don't have workers without disabilities because the amount of subcontract work cannot be completed without the addition of these workers. However, even when they do include non-disabled peers, there's often little mixing. So while, again, in these sheltered employments, there should be individuals without disabilities there, it's important to, take a close look at these organizations. The Department of Labor does regulate to make sure that people are getting paid appropriately and that you're using folks appropriately. But again, that's just something always to be aware of. And then volunteer work. You can't volunteer where you get paid. So this can be a little bit tricky, but volunteer work is also another option. And then I'm going to leave you guys just with a video that just shows all these amazing employment opportunities, individuals, or all these experiences, employment experiences individuals with Down syndrome have participated in. And so you really can see the amazing positive impact they have on the employment community and then subsequently just local, state level, and nationally, how they contribute to our workforce. Alrighty, so those are just some examples. There's also another one that's really great that was supposed to open a Denver location called Tim's Place. Really, really interesting about an individual with Down syndrome that opened up a diner and really made for a really, really amazing place. I hope you guys have enjoyed learning a bit about Down syndrome. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.